Hi, my name is Terry Suda. I'm the Adult Services Programming Coordinator at Wakanda Area Library. Viewing what's on display in the gallery here today is the Prince Valiant exhibit, which is done by artist Hal Foster.
Hal Foster was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He lived there, grew up there, and he lived through about 4 different depressions or recessions with his family. And he graduated from an art school in Winnipeg. His original work, when he started working, he used to draw corsets for the mail order company up and he learned, and he had to do everything in exquisite detail, because in those days when they published it, if a woman would buy a corset and it came out different from the picture, they'd get in trouble. So the artist had to do everything in precise detail. He was natural talent. He did a lot of artwork when he was at this Winnipeg School of Art. He said that he spent more hours doing the human body when he was working in that Winnipeg art studio than most doctors ever did when they were studying the human body. He did a lot of work for a Campbell Ewald advertising agency that did work for Popular Mechanics, and there are pictures in this exhibit showing what he did. The Canadian National Railroad, he did award-winning work there for the Canadian Royal Mounted Police. He was an outdoorsman. He was even a scout. He used to go out and take people out into the fishing and whatnot. And then he couldn't find work up there during one of these depressions, so he rode a bicycle and came all the way down to Chicago, 1,300 miles, to see if they had a job for artists here, and he worked at various places. And then he ended up on Michigan Avenue in Chicago at the Polensky and Young Art Studio. He went to the Art Institute of Chicago and various other schools, and he ended up with what you might call a PhD in art. So he was a highly trained artist, and he became one of the top commercial artists in Chicago. Then what happened was this Joe Nebe had a thought. He wanted to sell ads. So in the 1920s and before, the Sunday comics and all the comics were strictly for the children of the subscribers. There was Betty Boop, there was Mutt and Jeff, there was animal things like Crazy Cat, all that sort of thing, all single line drawings with single dimensions. And Joe Nebe had the idea, he wanted to sell ads in the Sunday comics and elsewhere and draw adults into the comic sections because there were no ads there. This was 1920s. So his idea was, if he could find an adventure hero, well drawn, and put it into the Sunday comics, it would draw adults into the into the papers, and he could sell ads there. That was the whole idea, was selling ads. Nebe said, well, where could I find an adventure hero that would draw people in, who was well known? It just so happened that Hal Foster worked at the Tree Studios in Chicago, which was on State Street and Ontario. It was a big enclave of artists, writers, musicians, and so on. And one of the people who worked there, or lived there actually, was Edgar Rice Burroughs, and the artist who did 13 of his very, very popular and very famous Tarzan novels. St. John was the name of the artist. They finally got together and they said Tarzan was the one. And Burroughs, they made an agreement with Burroughs, and St. John didn't want to do the artwork because he didn't like to work on deadlines. So they asked Hal Foster to make up 6 weeks of a portfolio that Nebe could go around and sell this Tarzan to the newspapers. Well, he did that, and they sold it to a small amount of newspapers. Then, of course, the thing that changed the whole picture was the crash of 1929. Hal Foster didn't want to do the comic because he was making big money as a commercial artist, and St. John didn't want to do it, so they hired a man named Rex Maxson to do Tarzan, and they sold it to a few newspapers, but it wasn't much of a success. Then when the crash came, after a year or so, Foster was broke. He was fishing off of the Montrose Pier to feed his family. And things weren't going well for the newspaper industry, and Edgar Rice Burroughs wasn't making money that he thought he would off of Tarzan. So he said, I want Hal Foster to do Tarzan. So Foster took it over and he changed the whole way that it was presented. First of all, he used a single light source which gave it a three-dimensional picture on each panel that created shadows. And in the past, everything else in the newspapers were all single dimensions with just the front art sketches with the pen and ink. But when he developed this three-dimensional thing, that changed everything. Then he decided to put the balloons, they always had these balloons over the tops of the picture which distracted from the drawing, and he put everything down below so that it wouldn't distract from the picture. That was number two. Number three, he didn't like the way what they used to do is they just used to submit the pen and ink drawings to the printer and let the printer color it any way he wanted. Well, he didn't like that. So he made a copy and he colored it himself the way he thought it should be, like a real artist would do it. And he had the printers do it as close as they could.